One of the most amazing people that has lived a radiant life is Gladys Aylward. She was a young lady in England, and God called her to take the mission of Jesus, and she felt to China. At that point, she didn't have any money. She's working multiple jobs. She saved up enough money to get a train ticket to as far as she could get in Russia. After she got to the end of the line, she had to figure out a way to get from there over into China. The soldiers warned her this is dangerous, especially for a young woman to get there. She eventually makes her way, and this is the middle of war-torn China and wars with Japan. She gets to where she felt God called her to go, and the first thing she witnesses is a young man being beheaded right in front of her. This was not an easy place to go, but there was a boldness and a fearlessness in Alice. She told people about Jesus. She was rejected continually, told that she was a foreigner, then in part and the devil, but she was committed to seeing Jesus come. She ends up collecting a group of orphans. She cares for them. She creates a home. She ends up getting a job with the local leaders to help the young ladies that were breaking all the foot binding that was happening in that culture. She comes to a position of prominence, so much so that there was a prison riot, that people were getting killed. And the leader of the community, of the region, comes to Alice and he says, you need to go in there and stop the fighting. You always say that God is with you. And so if your living God is with you, then you need to go in and stop the fighting. With a fearlessness that she exhibited her whole life, she walked into that prison and she negotiated a peace. And God brought peace into that region. Right? How is it that someone like this could be so brave, could be so fearless? Well, she remembers what it says in Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid or discouraged. Why? Because the Lord is with you wherever you go. Right? There is something so powerful about that verse. Remember, Joshua is about to lead the people into one of the most dangerous situations the people of God were going to go into. But God reminded him, as long as I'm with you, you can live fearlessly. So Joshua was long before Jesus came. How much more so should we live fearlessly now knowing that Jesus has come? Because he promised that he will always be with us. It says even to the end of the age, he will be with us. In fact, he said, I'm going to give the Holy Spirit not just to be by you, but to be in you. Right? You and I, we have access to the presence of God all the time. There's a fearlessness that should rise within us because we don't have to go to a temple to encounter God. We don't have to go through rituals to encounter God. We get to be in the presence of God and know he is with us and in us at all times. You see, the more we talk with Jesus, the more we realize that we can be with Jesus, the more fearless we should be. My friend Mark Batterson, he says this in one of his books, that Jesus didn't die to keep us safe. He died to make us dangerous. What I love is hearing that from Mark, because Mark has lived this out. You see, when Mark planted the church in Washington, D.C., he was just a few people and he was struggling, and it was a difficult place to plant a church, and they were right outside of Union Station. That's where they were planting the church, just a few people that were coming, and he would pray and walk the neighborhoods and say, Lord, help us to be fearless. Lord, help us to make a difference in this city. And he kept walking around this crack house, and he would walk around it week after week. And he started praying that God would give him that location and return it and turn it into something even more powerful. They were able to eventually buy that crack house, and they turned it into what was now known as Ebenezer's Coffee House. Ebenezer's Coffee House is one of the most decorated, rewarded coffee houses in all of the DC area. And it has been the launching point for now a church that has bought a whole city block, and God is using them to make a powerful difference in Washington, DC. Why? Because the more time you spend with Jesus, the more you live fearlessly. Right? Now, fearlessly doesn't mean that we're going to live risk-free. In fact, you can't spell faith without the letters R-I-S-K. Remember, Jesus called Peter and said, leave the boat, come out to me. Peter had to be willing to put his life on the line to follow Jesus. If we're going to follow Jesus, we got to be willing to put it all on the line, because the future is always uncertain. But when you are with Jesus, there is a certainty that he is always with you. Jesus is going to call you, and he's going to call me. He's going to call each of us to take a step out of the boat. He's going to ask us to take a step and put faith into motion. Right? Fear is always going to make us wait for certainty, but faith tells us to move even when the future is uncertain and unknown. God is calling you to follow him. He's calling us to put our lives on the line. He's calling us to follow him, and that's going to be filled with uncertainty. We're not going to know everything that's going to happen, but we do know that when we follow him, that there is going to be opportunities for divine moments to happen. Opportunities to watch God put something into motion. I love this concept, right? Because you don't always know what God's asking you to start. He might ask you to start something, to put something into motion, to live fearlessly that has repercussions years later. I want you to think of the story of Edward Kimball. Edward was a shoe salesman. He worked in a shoe store, and he taught Sunday school at his church. And there was a young man that came and worked at that shoe store that he was getting to his Sunday school class, but he wanted to tell him about Jesus. He eventually prayed with him to receive Jesus into his life, and that young boy's name was D.L. Moody. D.L. Moody was one of the great evangelists of our era, and he was at one of his services led F.B. Meyer, an incredible pastor, to the Lord. F.B. Meyer became pastor of a church, and in his church, Wilbur Chapman was raised up and mentored. And Wilbur Chapman then had a relationship with Billy Sunday, and mentored him. He was a former professional baseball player, turned then evangelist. And at a Billy Sunday rally, Mordecai Ham gave his life to the Lord. And at a Mordecai Ham service, Billy Graham gave his life to the Lord. And we know where it goes from there. God is calling us not to do everything all at once, but to be fearless and to put something in motion as we trust him. Jesus is with us, and the more we talk with him, the more confidence we should have, and the more we should look for ways to say, God, how can I put something into motion for your kingdom? Right? We're not called to do the miraculous. We might not all pray in multiple millions of dollars like Mark Batterson did, but we are called to live fearlessly. We might not all be called to put our lives on the line like Alice did, but we are all called to take a step in the direction God calls us. When we follow Jesus, when we realize that he's always with us, we don't have to live passively. We don't have to live like we're nervous about what might happen. We can live with confidence. We can take a step out of that boat. We can answer the call to step into the prison. We can answer the call to pray around a crack house. We can answer the call to lead a young boy that works at a shoe store to Jesus. We are called to put something into motion that will matter for eternity, because we live fearlessly the more we realize that we are with Jesus. Spending time with Jesus will change the way that you engage your day. Spending time with Jesus will help you live fearlessly.